Hey everyone. I'm going to use this screencast to go over thesis statements and to give you some reminders and to show you some student samples and walk you through those. And hopefully this will make your writing of your thesis statement a little easier, a little more directed. So let's get started. I'm pretty sure most of these reminders are things you already know. The first one is that your thesis is the central point of your essay in one sentence. It needs to be an argument, like an opinion, and something that you are going to prove. Also, importantly, because this paragraph or this essay is only 4 paragraphs, your thesis needs to be narrow enough and focused enough, though, to prove in a 4 paragraph essay. Use a critical lens to focus on a specific character, scene, element, technique, or aspect of the film. Remember, only 4 paragraphs. You cannot cover your entire film in 4 paragraphs. So hone in and focus in on a specific element. Propose an argument, not a statement of fact. Answer an interpretive or evaluative question. So you wrote one. You wrote one for homework. You have it. If you did the homework, you have it, which was to write a question. I had you write 2 actually. And you used the sheet that I gave you of some general type questions, and then you created a question that was specific to your film. And then when you answer that question, that is the basis of a good thesis. Be clear and precise, obviously. Okay. Things to remember. All films have a message. Sometimes those messages are explicit and overt and okay, clear, like they've hit us over the head. We know what the message is. Other times the message is far more implicit and it's what is implied. And what we're asking you to do is to go below the surface a little bit, and to look a little more closely at how those pieces kind of work together. You're going to have time. We've already given some time, and there'll be more time to brainstorm and free write and to kind of gather your thoughts to see what direction you want to go in. And even as we're going through this process of you putting together your thesis statements and your topic sentences, please keep an open mind in that you might need to adjust your thesis a little bit. You might need to adjust your argument, and you need to be open to that and don't get stuck in the one way of or the one way of thinking or what it is you want to argue. Sometimes you need to just kind of open that a little bit, and work with that. It'll help. That's just part of the process. All right, some sample thesis statements. So these are from past students. And even if it's a thesis statement for a film that you have never seen, it's okay. I'd like you to stick with it, and not skip over it because you haven't seen the film. It's not that important that you haven't seen these films, although I think some of them you will have seen, and that'll be helpful. But you're really looking at the argument that they're making. You want to see how they are applying their lens. You want to see how they're forming their argument, where they need to say more. So here we go. Here's the first thesis statement. Within It's a Wonderful Life, there is an ongoing conflict between the middle class, represented by George Bailey, and the upper class, represented by Mr. Potter. So, one thing I do like about this thesis is she doesn't say, the Marxist lens. She doesn't tell me what I know what lens, I know what theory she's applying because I see that there is conflict. There's the word conflict, and I see that there's the middle class and upper class. Fair enough. That's a good start, but there are some things that she would need to work on with this thesis. It's clear she employs the Marxist lens, but this is also a statement of fact. In this in this film, there is a conflict between middle class and upper class. But she needs to give a little bit more. She might want to talk a little bit about this class conflict. What conclusions can be drawn about the class conflict? Maybe in her thesis, she needs to identify what is the conflict and how is it resolved, maybe. Um, she might want to talk about what the film, what the filmmaker is saying about class conflict through this film. Now, I don't expect her to cover all of these questions in improving her thesis, but this is what I mean by maybe adding a little bit more, delving a little more into analysis, is answering maybe one of these questions in her thesis. So in this thesis, there's not a huge there's really not an argument here. It's pretty much a statement of fact. In order to make an argument, she would have to address one of these other questions in her thesis. Okay, I'm going to put the next thesis up. I'm going to read it, and then I'm going to sit for just a moment and let you think about it. Is there one thing you would like? What is one thing that you would point out about this thesis, positive or constructive? In Psycho, Norman Bates suffers from the Oedipal complex. All right. Um, First, I know that she's employing the psychoanalytic lens, but her thesis is very vague, too brief, too vague, too general, and there's just not quite an argument here. She needs to provide more details. So, in the, she suffers from the Oedipal complex. In what way? How so? Where do we see evidence of this complex? What conclusions can be drawn from this observation? What is the result of it with Norman Bates? So the thesis is just too brief. You probably said that. You're like, wow, it's really short. It's true. She needs more detail. Where do we see evidence of this complex? Um, and the conclusions. In the apartment, female characters are portrayed as subordinate to male characters and follow traditional gender roles. In a way, this one's kind of like the It's a Wonderful Life thesis, in that I can tell what theory is going to be employed, talking about gender roles and separating male and excuse me, female characters and gender roles. That's great, but this is way too vague. You've got to identify what traditional gender role are you talking about. Um, the language needs to be more precise. Which female character is she going to be discussing? Or what male character? So um, she might want to say that. She also being more precise with her language. What does she mean by subordinate? How? What are the gender roles? You've got to identify those using more precise language. Um, it's okay for your thesis to be a little more general than your topic sentences. Obviously, your topic sentences should be far more specific. For example, you should mention which characters you're going to discuss in your topic sentences. In your thesis, you can be a little bit more general. If you want to say female characters, male, that's fine. But what is meant by how are these female characters subordinate, and then also identifying what gender roles that should be more specific in your thesis. Another thing that she could offer in a thesis is, does the film ultimately endorse or condemn these gender roles, and how? That might be something that is part of what she might want to put in her analysis, is that the film ultimately condemns traditional gender roles through the character, da 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 da. And so it's not required that she put this in her thesis, but I'm trying to show you different ways that you can develop your thesis into something far more, a far more solid argument. All right, this one's about Titanic. So I'll give you a minute to read it and then to think about this thesis. All right. One of the most obvious indicators of James Cameron's ideological stance against the rich and powerful is how he draws his characters in the film Titanic. Jack Dawson, a penniless bohemian, is an immediately likable fellow, whereas his wealthy opposite, Cal Hockley, is immediately dislikable. All right. Um, A lot of good things happening in here. One, um, this is an example that I had just talked about from the previous slide, where she took what the film's opinion is. What is the film's message about rich people versus working class or lower class? And what I mean by lower class is they were in the lower class, in the third class compartments. What is the film saying about that? That's mentioned in the beginning part of the thesis here about James Cameron's ideological stance against the rich and powerful. So that's how, one way, this is an example of how you might do that if you were so inclined. All right. So it's clear that this argument is using the Marxist lens. That is clear. And again, she doesn't use the word Marxist lens. And I'd like you to avoid identifying your lens in your thesis. It's not necessary. I should be able to tell from your thesis what lens you are exploring. Just by looking at this thesis, it does set itself up nicely for two body paragraphs if she wanted to do one on each character. However, if I remember correctly, what she did do for this was she contrasted Jack and Cal in two paragraphs. So in one paragraph, she contrasted Jack and Cal in their treatment of Rose. And then the next one was how Jack and Cal, I can't remember, God, but it was something, but it was contrasting them. It took a topic, one. Each paragraph had a topic and it contrasted them in some way. Or you could do one paragraph for each. Either way, it's a pretty solid thesis statement there. All right. And then I'll wait a little bit and let you think about it. In the film Eighth Grade, director Bo Burnham uses intense electric instrumental music, as well as the absence of it, to further the overwhelming and dramatic emotions felt by the main character Kayla during her final week of middle school. All right. I kind of wish we were talking right now because I'd love to know what your opinion was of eighth grade if you saw it. Um, okay, all in all, pretty good. It refers to a specific cinematic element, which I really like. And I can tell that she's doing a something psychoanalytic because, right, she's talking about emotions and it could be a little clearer, and I'm going to go on to that in my next bullet, which is identify the emotions. I to say about the music and the absence of the music, um, contributing to the dramatic emotions. To me, I tend to kind of balk at that. I would circle that and say identify that. What dramatic emotions, what drives those emotions, what are you talking about? And then maybe the result of that. Remember, she's doing the psychoanalytic lens, so identifying those emotions and how she's dealing with that would make it a little bit more focused on a psychoanalytic reading. But I do like that she picked a specific cinematic element. She picked the soundtrack and she picked the music and analyzed that. Okay. An Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. A scene involving a childhood memory of Joel's shows that his subconscious fear of intimacy and numerous insecurities in his relationship with Clementine can be directly attributed to his relationship with his mother. All right, let me sit for a few seconds, have you read it, and give a thought. Okay, a couple of things I do like about this thesis. Clearly, it's the psychoanalytic lens, talking about subconscious fear of intimacy, numerous insecurities, and his romantic relationship with Clementine, and then attributing that to the relationship he had with his mother about his memories, right? His childhood memories, which are in the film. And so it highlights a specific scene. I can tell from her thesis, it's just very specific. I know how her paragraphs are probably going to work, um, but it highlights a specific um, scene of going back into the scene where he has this memory of his childhood. We get an insight into his relationship with his mother, and that informs us, the viewer, about what we perceive as a subconscious fear of his intimacy and insecurities because of that. All right, just a couple more. Stick with me. You guys are doing great. All right. So this is one about Pulp Fiction, and I wanted to try and give an example of the Catholic lens. So this student had a kind of a unique request in that she wanted to use this outside source that she had read, and wanted to cite it and use it. I said yes, um, because she was one of the only students to pick a Christian or Catholic lens, and I thought it was interesting, especially since I do love this film. So here's the thesis. While the Catholic news service diminishes Quentin Tarantino's masterpiece to a, quote, morally offensive, ultra-violent tale of vicious killers and assorted lowlifes, Pulp Fiction is more than just an ultra-violent tale. In the film, the scenes of ultra-violence frame Jules' journey of spiritual awakening as he explores the importance of God's existence and role in the world. So, there were a couple of things. One, um, I had already said that this student had asked to respond to an article that she read. But one thing that I really like is that she acknowledged the opposite argument. She took an opposite argument. She frames it and includes that in her thesis and acknowledges the antithesis. So what she's proving, what she wants to prove in her essay, is that reducing Pulp Fiction down to just an ultra-violent tale of lowlifes is not fair. That those ultra-violent scenes have purpose in the development of Jules' spiritual journey and his awareness of God and his role in the world and Jules' place in it, and his search for it. So by offering the antithesis, the opposite argument, I felt that just was I typically I like that for this kind of a thesis. Okay. That was the last of it. I'm trying to keep this to under 20 minutes. So, but I guess you can go back if you wanted to look at any of those thesis statements, and listen to me yammer on. That's fine. Or to look at those bullet points as a way to help you critique your own thesis, and how you want to write it. So, what you're going to do is this prep sheet is going to be something that you're going to work on. And we're kind of walking you through how to organize your essay. So you're going to make a copy of this document, and it's going to help you collect, organize, and draft your thoughts for your film paper. So if you notice, I take you down through your thesis statement. What was the question that you wrote? How do you respond to the question? Because when you respond to the question, therein lies the guts of your thesis statement, of your one sentence. You asked the question, right? You wrote your question, you thought about it. You had two, so hopefully you pick one that intrigues you the most, the one that you think you can say the most about, and then respond to the questions that you chose, and respond to them, and therein lies like I said, the guts to your thesis. Okay, then we'll move on to body paragraphs and topic sentences, and then how to do your intro. Can I just say, I even hesitated putting this on here. I might take it off. Don't worry about your conclusion right now. Honest to God, it's the conclusion can come last. It really can. I'll talk more about conclusion later. Right now, your homework is really going to focus on writing 3 sentences. You're going to write your thesis statement and your 2 topic sentences. And you want to remember to write in present tense. You want to remember to avoid first person. You want to keep it in third person. And you know that you're going to have an introduction before. So if you only want to mention the film's name in your thesis, that's fine. If you only want to mention the director's name, that's fine. But remember that all the components that we just talked about in those slides and how to critique your thesis. All right, I'm just under 20 minutes, so I'm going to sign off. You know, you can email me and we can Zoom and meet one-on-one to talk about your thesis if you wish. But I'm going to go ahead and sign off. Thanks for sticking with me, everybody. I hope this was helpful.